Hey everyone, welcome back to Big Strong Book. I am Reed, and today we are going to be discussing Chapter 7 of the Dragonbone Chair, the Conqueror Star. So, after we had the ending of Chapter 6, which ended with a night of revelry and a good feast after the funeral of Prester John, now we kind of move forward through time a little bit. Past the spring and summer of the first regnal year of Elias. So I will just begin with the opening paragraph here. The spring and summer of Elias's first regnal year were magical, sunbright with pomp and display. All Osten seemed reborn. The young nobility came back to fill the Hayholt's long quiet halls, and so marked was the difference that they might have brought color and daylight with them to what had been a dark place. As in John's young days, the castle was full of laughter and drinking, and the swagger of shining battle blades and armor. At night, music was heard in the hedged gardens once more, and the splendid ladies of the court flitted to, or fled from, assignations in the warm darkness like graceful flowing ghosts. The tourney field sprang back to life, sprouting multicolored tents like a bank of flowers. To the common people it seemed as though every day was a holiday, that the merrymaking would have no end. King Elias and his friends made furious sport, in the manner of children who must soon be put to bed, and know it. All of Erkenland seemed to roister and tumble like a summer drunken dog. So that's the tone that's set for this chapter. And in many ways, this chapter is, I don't want to say it's a holding pattern. This chapter is pure character development. And it's, in the mass market version here, it's only about 15 pages. So there's not a whole lot to it besides character development. And that's not a bad thing. We get good character moments. I think for sure this chapter probably won't rate as highly in the minds of first-time readers, just because it's a little character development kind of as you know that we're starting to ratchet up to something big, but it takes a snapshot of the characters as they are now that we are, almost a year through Elias's first year as king. So he's been king for almost a year now. We jump forward in time, and the first little piece of character interaction that we get is with Simon and Morgannus. So Simon is kind of in the workshop. He's in Morgannus' workshop, and he's copying things down for Morgannus, but he's copying down a book written in Nabani, and Simon he's fed up with the task. He's like, why do I have to do this? I can't even read this language. And again, he doesn't understand what's really in the book. He sees some of the pictures, the illustrations, and one is he points to something that Morgannus tells him means the Conqueror's star. And he says, it means, Morgannus said as he closed the cover and picked the book up, the Conqueror's star, and it is not the kind of thing that you need to know about. So for first-time readers, that's kind of almost like Morgannus saying, not yet. We're not going to talk about that yet. And then there's an interesting exchange between Simon and Morgannus, more from the perspective of, you like reading it as a reader, because Morgannus asks Simon, what do you want to learn? You're here, you're doing these things for me. What do you hope to get out of this, essentially? What do you hope to learn? And Simon's like, well, what about magic? And Morgannus says, what about reading? And then Simon's like, what? Why should I care about books and letters? And they're just written stories, and who cares? And Morgannus says, books are magic. That is the simple answer, and books are traps as well. Magic? Traps? Books are a form of magic. The doctor lifted the volume he had just laid on the stack. Because they span time and distance more surely than any spell or charm. What did so-and-so think about such and such 200 years agone? Can you fly back through the ages and ask him? No, or at least, probably not. But if he wrote down his thoughts, if somewhere there exists a scroll or a book of his logical discourses, he speaks to you across centuries. And if you wish to visit far Nescaru or lost Candia, you have also but to open a book. And then later on, a piece of writing is a trap, and the best kind. A book, you see, is the only kind of trap that keeps its captive, which is knowledge, alive forever. The more books you have, the more traps, then the better chance of capturing some particular elusive shining beast, one that might otherwise die unseen. And I love that. I love the way that Tad Williams, through Morgenis, sums up what a lot of reading is about. You know, it's about obtaining that knowledge, but have the metaphor and the relation of having books being traps, books holding these shining beasts within them that are forever alive for a reader. It's just, you know, it's cool imagery. And, you know, this section reminds me of the ever famous quote from A Song of Ice and Fire. I believe this is a quote from the character Jojen Reed in A Dance with Dragons. And I forget if he's talking to Mira or Bran, but when he says, I think the quote is something along the lines of, the man who reads lives 1,000 lives, and the man who never reads lives only one. Like, it's a good quote, and that kind of reminded me of this, even though obviously this came out over 20 years before A Dance with Dragons. I can't help but link those two in my mind. So then Simon kind of probes Morgenis, and he's like, what about real magic? Like what Pyrates is doing? Well, Morgenis kind of tells him, you know, Pyrates is dangerous. He, unlike looking for the shining beasts in the daylight, he opens his door at night for whatever might come in. But once that thing comes in during the night, it might be hard to shut that door again. So again, we've seen Pyrates. We know as a reader, even in this moment, even though Pyrates hasn't that magic, whatever he's doing, we haven't really seen any machinations of Pyrates. We know he's an evil dude because, I mean, he killed a puppy. Like, that's the thing. We know he is, and so we're waiting. We're kind of being led along. Simon knows it. Simon knows, well, he does magic. He's kind of a shady guy. Morgenis obviously knows more than he is telling Simon, but he's just like, people like him, you know, there's, you know, pursuit of knowledge for all the right things, and then there's pursuit of knowledge for wrong reasons or ways that are not necessarily deviant, but deviant and dangerous. And Pyrates, in Morgenis' mind, falls within that latter category of searching for novel that is perhaps deviant and dangerous to many people. So that's the end of that section. Then we jump to Duke Isgrimnur of the Rimmersgard and Prince Joshua, who are, you know, jousting in a courtyard, it seems, just, you know, practicing with wooden swords. And this is something completely random, but at the beginning of this section, which is page 95 of the mass market version, it opens up with Isgrimnur, and he says, "Ha!" Isgrimnur growled. "A touch, man, a touch. Admit it." "The barest whisper across my vest," Joshua said, raising an eyebrow in faint surprise. It just came to my mind, I don't know why, hearkening to Shakespeare, the duel between Hamlet and Laertes in whatever it is, Act 5, Scene 2 of Hamlet. It's just an exchange, like a quick exchange where they're dueling, and Hamlet kind of gets a torso hit on Laertes, and he's like, a hit, what say you? And then whatever, God, I forget the name of the guy who's kind of moderating the judge, and he's like, a hit, a palpable hit. And then Laertes says, I think, a touch, I do confess a touch, or something to that effect. I might be butchering that exchange, but that's just what I was reminded of, was that little exchange in of course, Shakespeare's great play. So just thought of that. So again, we get them back and forth, and we get the idea of this great relationship between, not only for sure between Isgrimnur and Joshua, but then there is kind of that same relationship between Elias and Isgrimnur, or it hints that there was once that relationship. The relationship, it seems, has strained now, and we get confirmation of this later on as Isgrimnur talks to him about not necessarily a political matter, but more of a infrastructural matter pertaining to the Rimmersgard. And again, we get the feeling that Elias and Isgrimnur used to have a good relationship, but ever since Elias has become king, ever since he has been confiding with priorites, so Joshua and Isgrimnur are kind of, practicing sword fighting, and then Elias comes up to them, priorites is by him. Priorites is kind of, almost like one has to imagine Wormtongue in The Lord of the Rings, where he's kind of bending at the ear of Theoden. And when Elias comes over, Isgrimnur asks him about, there's a garrison, or Joshua talks about it, I guess. There's a garrison, he says, at Vest Venby. It hasn't been, the garrison hasn't been replaced. And then Elias says, well, Scully, remember Scully from chapter 6, so he says you have more than enough men. And then Isgrimnur calls Scully a liar, and that builds tension between Elias and Isgrimnur. And even Priorites is like, dude, chill. He says, please, my lord, he said, this is not the time or place for such things. He flicked an impudent, heavy-lidded glance at Joshua, or so I humbly admit. Like, Priorites obviously has deeper intentions in wanting to advise Elias. It's not just for the good of the kingdom or the good of his own pocket. But, there's this thing affecting Elias. And it's a recurring thing. We've kind of already seen it before a little bit. But Elias is a jealous person in a weird way, even though he is king. And he's still a very tortured individual, and that's kind of his personality. And clearly, him becoming king, even though they are in this period of revelry, he's quick to snap. Just when somebody questions one of his loyal lieutenants, like Scully, he gets extremely defensive and very uncouth. And Priorites is more somebody who might try to play a political game, even though Priorites killed a puppy in front of everybody. That's what's kind of funny about it, that Priorites is like, no, Elias, there's a time and a place for this kind of thing. So then Elias and Joshua end up jousting together. And again, there's tension between them. Not obviously what was established a few chapters back with their strained relationship is continued here. and then they retire for a lunch meal. And then we go back again to Simon, who's trying to like sneak bread in the kitchens. And again, there's not a whole lot. There's not a whole lot, like, in terms of plot substance. With Simon, we still get, him being so obsessed with trying to just get bread, literally get bread in the kitchen. While he understands that the world is changing around him, he doesn't understand, obviously, the importance of reading and the importance of letters, and that's something that he is starting to learn. But then also just his interaction with women or with just girls his own age, he just has no idea how to talk to them, but even less than maybe some of his average peers might. And so they talk about him and the servant girl, Hepzibah. They talk about Prince Miriamel and how, she has all these, ladies to brush her hair, and that her father, King Elias, wants Miriamel to marry Earl Fangbald, but Miriamel doesn't want, there's some tension there. And so then, Simon's attitude towards all this, it's summed up pretty succinctly by the close of a section, just as grimacing, Simon picked up a round stone and rattled it off the bailey wall. And throughout this chapter 2, we get an idea of the fact that the seasons aren't changing. They're almost in more of an autumn approaching winter, and there hasn't been that much rain that year. There hasn't even been a hint of snow, even though there should at this point of the year. So clearly something is abnormal, unusual. Everything is kind of the tectonic plates of this story are shifting ever so slightly. And then at the end, so Dr. Morganus is kind of standing on the battlements, and he sees Simon, and he's like, oh man, like, he still doesn't know how to talk to women. He's more child than man than even other people his age. And then he gets a message, kind of from a raven, but he just snatches it out of the sky. And I'll read the message here, and it says, Morgan, the fires of Stormspike have been lit. From Tunguldir I have seen their smoke 9 days, and their flames 8 nights. The white foxes are awake again, and in the darkness they trouble the children. I have also sent winged words to our smallest friend, but I doubt they will find him unawares. Someone has been knocking at dangerous doors. From Yarnaga. And then, so again, for first-time readers, those terms, Stormspike, the white foxes, those aren't terms we've heard yet. I'll maybe have a little bit to talk about this in the spoiler section. But then Priorites comes up, and he's kind of like, odd weather, is it not? And then I myself have thought of studying birds. They are so easily captured, and obviously he knows what Morganus is up to, snatching the letter out of the sky. But yeah, that's kind of this chapter. It is a little bit of character development. Obviously, the chapter's short, it's only 15 pages. And it's increasing tension. Simon is he's struggling to understand what Morganus is trying to impart on him. He still has a guarded indifference to a lot of things, even though he is interested in the world. It's more like he wants to learn about the world without putting in the work, putting in the effort that might seem dull. He doesn't understand the value of that sort of work yet. So there's still a lot for him to learn in that respect. So that's pretty much it for chapter 7. So there'll only be a couple things I'll mention in spoilers here. So farewell to all first-time readers. So for spoilers, the little friend that Jarnaga mentions obviously is Binabik, and Jarnaga, I'm going to flip to the back of the book right now because I've been thinking about this. Is Xarnaga, is he Benebic's mentor who dies? Or was he one of the priests? Or no, that's right. Ukakuk. Yeah, Ukakuk was Xarnaga. Right, that's right. He's just a scroll bearer. He's a Rimmersman. That's right. I wasn't sure off the top of my head. I'm like, because I know Benebic had a master, but the master died, so that might not be him. But yeah, Ukakuk is the name of Benebic's master, who was part of the League of Scrolls. Or the League of the Scroll, not League of Scrolls. Yeah, and like other spoiler things, I mean, obviously the Conqueror star is an ill omen. It's interesting, and Eolair, this chapter is the first mention of him. He and Guthwolf are like dealing with a horse issue in the background of a scene. Because I wasn't sure, Eolair is one of my favorite characters, but I had no memory before of when he first showed up. And here it is, it's just he's kind of in the background of a scene, about 100 pages into, a little bit over a tenth of the way into this book. So just interesting thing. Again, this was a very light chapter. So if you feel differently about this chapter, whether good or bad, or agree with anything I've said, or disagree, just let me know. Comment below, and I will see you guys tomorrow for a double reading, chapters 8 and 9. See you then.